an interesting use case. So let's see. Okay. Well, just a slide about agenceXML. You can recognize some various customers, organizations, and so on. Anyway. Okay, so about this presentation, we'll talk about the XForms context, which is specific to it. The main point is about how to modelize a JSON object into a browser for use with XForms. We'll be talking about also JSONP. And there is a short demo at the end. So, about the XForms context. First, let me say that for XForms we have models. Within them there are instances, bindings, submissions. And we have also controls, various controls, much richer than in HTML5. We have events, specific events for XForms. One example is XForms value changed, but also more current events like DOM activate and so on. And we have also actions to interact with the data or the form for dispatching events, pending a submission, refreshing, and so on. About XPath in XForms, for XForms 1.1, the current recommendation, it's just XPath 1.0. Even if some implementation already have XPath 2.0, but also with extra functions, especially for XPath 1.0, an if statement, quite useful of course, but also some functions about encryptions, date management, credit cards, and so on. XPath is heavily used in XForms, especially for not set bindings, but any kind of calculation, whether a value is required, is read-only, you can express it with XPath. Evaluation is also performed according to a current context, like in XSLT, for example. The default one is maybe unusual, but the default one is the document element. And we'll see it's useful in this case. There is also another point to consider with XForms and XPath. It's about dependencies. Because when we have to refresh a form, we need to know what to refresh. So, which expressions depend on which values. The context for XForms about servers, let me say first, it's of course in the XRX context, so XForms, REST, and XQuery, with native XML databases, but not just that. It can be used also with PHP, .NET, anything. Well, because it's also based on AJAX-based exchanges, which means when it's in the browser using HTML, HTTP request. And there is a limitation about this object. It's about the cross-domain limitation. You cannot interact with a server which is not the principal one, the one which delivered the form. For XForms 1.1, only XML serialization and flat get parameters list is available. Okay, what about JSON? JSON versus, I would say, XML. Some people say JSON is lighter because there is no namespace, there is no element versus attribute, what should I choose? And so, okay. Well, it's shorter because of mainly minimal closing tags, just brackets, a lot of them sometimes. It's richer, yes, because names are richer, there are arrays, there are data types inside. Fortunately, it's natively evaluated by browsers. It can be stored directly with JavaScript. But let's think about the query support. There are some frameworks to do something that's not natively in the browser. And as we can see, if we think about access, they are not supported in such extensions. Specifically, if you want something about the ancestors or the foreign siblings and so on. Dissonance is okay, but yeah, XPath is richer. We are considering JSON, but well, for XForms we might also consider vcard, CSV, formatted logs files, anything. I also want to talk about EXI, but well, from my point of view, EXI is smart serialization. So there are no such big problems such as convert it to XML. In fact, it's easier. Okay, so we'll see how to modelize JSON for XForms. Let me say that it's some kind of contribution to the XML community. So you can argue with me whether it's good, whether it could be improved and so on, of course. Let's see first the constraints. The purpose is, the main purpose, the first one, is from JSON to XML and back. It's not XML to JSON. You can do many things with XML, you cannot do easily with JSON. The second point is more specific with this context. It's about XPath. How to be able to use JSON within XForms without needing to specify expressions with JavaScript because it's JSON data or with XPath because it's XML. No, the purpose is to use XPath on JSON data. Some restrictions for implementations, just using extension functions, not to rewrite fully the XPath engine, not add too many extra elements. And what about the array notation? We already have square brackets in XPath. Why not to use it? There are also some interesting stuff about XML schema. XForms is supporting XSI type, XSI 9, and there is also XSD max occurs, which is interesting in the array context. Okay, so the general principles are for JSON values, just create elements within the empty namespace. I'm sorry, I don't hate namespaces, so I will use them. Yes, for metadata, we might need some specific information structure. So data types, arrays, and so on will be encoded in attributes within a namespace. And because there are also anonymous structures in JSON, extra elements will also be required. Okay, the first proposed rule is the simple one. The simpler is to add a document element for each JSON object. Let's name it XML anonymous. Well, okay, let's see with an example. In this structure, there are just two elements, A and B. So the natural fit for that is just adding this root element. That's easy. Below you have three XPath expressions. Because the default context for XForms is the document element. In fact, just saying A, you get the correct answer. B/C, it sounds like B.C. So it works. Okay. Anyway, JSON is richer about names. So we cannot create directly an element if the name is too complex with spaces, with accents, with anything. So let's use a specific element with a specific name reserved for that use. Let's say, well there it's 4 times underscore. Anyway. And put the full name within an attribute. And define functions to access it instead of having to know which is the name of this attribute and so on. A function is simpler. Okay, so you can see what can be done. A and B, well, it's converted in the underscore element with this metadata attribute. That's all. Of course, we have to consider when the JSON name is the reserved name for that purpose. Not difficult. You have some XPath examples to illustrate this. Okay. The third rule is about JSON data types. There are types within a JSON object. So why not using XSI type? You have JavaScript number, so use XSD double. You cannot distinguish a number which if it's an integer or a float, well, let's say it's a double. Boolean is easier, and I also mentioned the date type, the date class in JavaScript, because it's also possible in JSON. Let's consider it at date time. So, this is a more complex JSON example. With JSON, you can even have expressions to be evaluated, such as string plus A. This cannot be memorized, I'll say, in XML. But anyway, it's always instantly evaluated by the browser, by the agent, so it's not a problem. I have the example with 42 and about a date and a boolean. Named arrays are a more complex situation. So the next rule is about how to add elements to manage that. Well, to distinguish arrays with, let's say, single elements, we need an attribute to say it's in an array. And my proposition is about, it sounds like max occurs. Well, we don't have a limit in the array, but well, let's say why not use this one. There is also a constraint about empty arrays, empty strings, and empty arrays containing an empty strings. How to distinguish them? Well, XSI9 can help with that. We might need also some functions to access these attributes. So, for the A array with 2 elements, the proposition is about 2 A elements with this max occurs attribute for each. The B array is an empty one, so we have to add the XSI9 attribute. And if we look at the C array containing an empty string, okay, just write it this way without the XSI9. So if we consider an XPath expression such as A square bracket 1, it returns string A. With JSON and JavaScript, you would have A square bracket 0. That's the only difference. You have to add 1. That's all. Okay. But there are also anonymous arrays. Sorry. So, well, we have to add an extra element for that. So it's less human readable this way. That's true, but well, for an XForm engine, it's not a problem. Whenever you want to access an anonymous element, just use the star to in the XPath expression. So to get 42, you have to use star square bracket 1 slash star square bracket 2. Okay. Well, is it possible to modify, to enhance the XPath engine to support more easily those new features? First of all, why not? Couldn't we be using, for example, the backcode character to delimit names? In different languages, it's possible. Might be able to have long names in every context. We could also modify the name and the local name functions to include the full name facility. They should be modified also for the anonymous elements being added. And this anonymous element might even disappear for XPath expressions, depending on the context. When it's it's a root element, I think it's useless. Whenever somewhere else, it could be written just 2 backquotes. And when in front of square brackets, it might be useless also. Okay, so now let's consider the JSONP context. What is JSONP? It's about using using API on different servers and be able to get data from them. Okay, the JSONP trick is just about adding a script element with an src attribute with parameters. And you specify a callback function. So this script will immediately be executed, then, well, you get the data, you can use them. And there is no cross-domain limitation. That's an important point. So, with the XForms context, the callback function can be used to convert the JSON data into XML inside an instance. About the demo, let's have a look at the Wikipedia API. So it's a search API. You type anything, and it's querying Wikipedia to know if the term exists or not. The XForms document will contain an instance to send the request, an instance to get the response. It will be sent using the get method. And well, there is some binding about whether this term already exists or not. As you will see, it's in the incremental mode, so each time you type, this is sent to the server and you get the responses. Okay, let's try this live. Here is the form. Hello. And then you might choose what you want.
Kitty.
You want Kitty? Yeah. That's it. Okay. So, each time you type, you get the responses. Okay, so, oops. With this contribution, you can have XForms instances written in JSON. You can use XPath on JSON. And it works with JSONP. Okay, so my question is, what about extensions to consider to facilitate that? The one I listed about names and so on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alain. We have time for questions, so do we have a question? Yeah.
Hans-Jürgen Rennau, BITS GmbH. I have the following question. You enhance the XPath language in a way.
Yeah.
And Yeah, and XPath, in my view, is always built on the data model of XML. So I think the counterpart with it would be, theoretically speaking, to enhance the XML data model. So either the info set or the XDM. And I think the advantage would be to get away from specific syntax decisions and attribute decisions and put it on a more theoretical basis. So my question is, what do you think? Would it make sense?
It surely makes sense. In XSLT context, only XML 1.0 can be used. So that's why it's just possible to enhance the XPath engine, which is part of XSLT. XSLT has its own engine, XPath engine. That's why I cannot modify the XML data model in XSLT. That's just why.
Thank you. We have another question from Mike K.
Michael K. There's a strong feeling of déjà vu here, if you'll excuse my French. Both in your talk and in Hans-Jürgen's question, because we've been spending a week in the XSL working group here in Prague, and quite a lot of the time over the last 6 months we've been spending discussing how to support JSON and the kind of data structure that it requires. I just thought it would be useful to sort of give a little update on the approach we're taking, which is that we are enhancing the data model rather than mapping JSON directly into XML the way you've done.
Okay.
We decided that ended up with structures that were too difficult to manipulate, and for various other reasons we wanted to add maps to the data model anyway. So what we're trying to do is to add maps to the data model and parse JSON into map data structures rather than directly into XML, then give you the opportunity to transform maps into XML and process them into an XML that's perhaps more native to XML, okay, rather than just a directly represented JSON as a direct automatic transformation. So there are a lot of people working on this. I mean, a lot of people have done a lot of work. John Snelson's done work on it, and all sorts of people have. And they've all hit the same problems of how you map names and nulls and empty arrays and those sort of things. So that's the approach we're taking.
Yeah. As I was saying, XSLT is using the browsers. So now it works. So it's what is nice with that. We don't have to wait for yet another good version of a good browser to use it.
Okay. Do you still have some questions? Yeah, Che?
So in general, rather than technologies that sort of look for a close coupling between XML and JSON at all, for instance, the idea of XForms directly acting on JSON rather than on XML, which then gets transformed to JSON somewhere in the pipeline. Because usually the point at which you want JSON, like in your example, is when you're talking to Google or anything right at the end. So I'm just curious, is it a matter of, is the motivation for adapting the XML technology specifically to operate on JSON maybe to put it all in the browser, or is it is it because of the performance implications of additional pipeline transforms?
Well, let me say first, it was to be able to use JSONP, and so that's why it was required to be able to interpret JSON data. Then, well, I had to find a solution. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks. So thank you, Alain, again. And